They go, yeah.
They'll switch to Netflix. There's too many entertainment options. So I was sitting there, like, the first time it happened, what can I do? And I looked over at my backpacks of the gear that runs on Speedify. You paid for a year of it. You can use it on any computer or device. So I just pulled out my one of several hotspots I have, hooked it up, cranked up Speedify, and it has never been a problem since.
We used the Speedify software at a command line level, so it's not running a whole UI which is starting to drain resources. It's really very, very base level. And the really clever people at the BBC got it all working, and we're now presenting whole programs every single day of the year have been presented using this technology. All our weather reports from our weather presenter are done already.
If I look back at my original lives, they are awful. They're terrible. But we all start somewhere and we all get better. And every time you go live and every time you get on camera, you're going to get a little bit more comfortable.
You saw part
Really?
of it? Cool.
Nice. All right, we are famous. You want to say hi to everybody? Now you're on the video. So wave. That's the camera right there. Nice. All right. We're going back to look at this guy's house. It has a lot of white lights.
There he is. Hey, Christian.
Fine.
And a telly light on the back so you can see when it's how it's live.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so these lights
do have RGB mixing, so if you want to do each color, you can mix them independently. Within the app, there are a couple features, and I'll just go show you this.
See power. There we go.
Woo! Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Is just building budget aesthetic gaming PCs, and I have my studio here now, so we've graduated away from the basement of my house and whatnot.
Also, I would say streaming kept me from going completely insane when I was in that hotel room for 2 weeks when I first got to Australia.
So raising awareness is really going to help break that stigma. We definitely have a stigma in our society where it's, not okay for folks to be open about their medical conditions. It's kind of seen as shameful.
All of us have these amazing cameras, Apple, Samsung, Google.
We have customers come in all the time who say, oh, I watched this stream and I came in from out of town and I knew we had to stop here.
We build custom PCs for a lot of content creators, gamers, you name it, businesses, colleges, esports.
And then I do a lot of thought leadership talking and trying to educate the industry on the value of techifying, as I call it, their events, and been doing that for a long time.
The first 2 years of live streaming was actually just myself. I was kind of acting as a community manager.
You know what? I never used to think that people wanted to cared about what I wanted to say, but now I'm like, you know what?
I care, Gina.
You've got to put it out there. You've just got to put it out there, and someone will listen.
I used to actually be solely mobile, so I used to teach people how to edit using KineMaster, which is just a mobile app. Really, really cool app.
I love the process of both. I love the editing process, the scripting process, and things like that of recorded videos, but nothing for me also beats the buzz that you get from pressing the go live button.
Welcome, welcome, welcome! It's Speedify Live, and I'm your host, Alex Gizis. This is the live stream about live streaming, brought to you by Speedify, the app that lets you combine all of your internet connections. Faster, more reliable internet for when you're streaming. So we started this show to bring you, people doing interesting things in live streaming and technologies related to it. And obviously it's become a little bit broad. We've got podcasters and stuff, and it's been fun. So give us a follow, like, subscribe, whatever it is, depending on where you're watching us, because we're streaming to all sorts of places today. So wherever you're watching, click that thing so you get a notification next time that we're live. And we are live. So if you post comments, we'll see those, and I and my guest will respond. And he's a very special guest, Joel Drapper. He's a software engineer. He's worked freelance. He's worked for Shopify. He's the host of an online show called Naming Things, where he and his co-host Casper, develop software and play with interesting code. And a lot of it is about how to problem solve. You get to see them actually solve problems. So let's bring Joel on and say hi.
Hey,
there
Alex.
He is. Hey,
can you hear me?
Welcome to Speedify Live. I can hear you.
Thanks. Yeah, great to be here.
All right. So how have you been?
Yeah, I've been great. I've been spending the last few weeks kind of working on a really fun project in Ruby. So yeah, doing great.
All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I sorry, distracted by the chat. Yeah, it's the real me. And I am from England. Yeah. So tell me you a bit about myself. So I am kind of I don't know, never done live streaming before, but I think I've kind of been thinking about doing it with this show that I run with Casper that you mentioned, Naming Things. And basically, like, on that show, we're trying to show, like, what it's like to kind of tackle with the kind of more meta problems of writing software, and, like, coming up with names can be, like, the hardest thing, or, like, trying to find the right abstraction. So
it's the old software developer joke, right? The two hardest things in software development are cache invalidation, naming things, and off by one errors.
Off by one errors. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of I got into software development kind of as a kid, I guess. I was more on the front end back then. Just enjoyed like building things, making things work on my computer since I was like an early teenager. Got my first job as a front-end developer when I was like 17. And I did that for a few years and kind of accidentally got exposed to Ruby on Rails and fell in love with Ruby. So kind of like since then, just spent the rest of that time like figuring out how to do Ruby better.
Nice. So we'll come back to Ruby. Yeah. So sure. with naming things, so far you don't do it live, right? You pre-record them and then upload the videos. Is that right?
Yeah. So we do pre-record them, but the idea is that there's like quite limited amount of editing going on. They are pretty long videos. They're like usually 2 hours long, something like that. And it's kind of like to let people see behind the scenes a bit. I used to do a lot of pairing with like junior developers in my job at Shopify. And I found that pairing with people sometimes they would pick up on things that were really not obvious, that you wouldn't want to, like, you wouldn't write about, or you wouldn't like put in a book. But they would like pick up on things, pick up on habits, or like pick up on how you can be really comfortable not knowing the answer to something as a senior developer, and you can kind of just be comfortable, like, I don't know how to do this, so let's break it down and figure it out. Like, let's go to Google and see if anyone's done this kind of thing before. And I kind of wanted to, like,
I feel like there's a Stack Overflow joke here.
Yeah. So I didn't want to hide
Being
that.
Comfortable enough to stop hiding that you're using Stack Overflow.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not done live, or so far it hasn't been done live, but it is pretty much like get on the phone with Casper or whoever I'm pairing with and like hit record and just go for it and see what happens.
Do you edit them at all?
Yeah, very, very brief like edits to the beginning and the end, basically. But other than that, no.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you're doing this, you guys are actually exploring the problem live. You're not doing it a second time, right? You're not
that's the idea. Yeah, it's not rehearsed at all. And to be fair, we've only done 2 of them so far, and there's a third one that I haven't yet published. I had some like unexpected life circumstances come up in the last couple of months, losing my job and stuff. So like, it's kind of taken a bit of a break, and I've also just been pretty distracted by this project I'm working on, I mentioned earlier, but I'm definitely going to get back to it and try to do some more. Like, yeah.
Nice. So when did you start coding?
It's difficult to say. I kind of started coding when I was like 12, but it was all very much like front-end stuff. I was kind of into design and like making things look good and like making user interfaces. And then it probably was maybe when I was, I don't know, like 22, that I got into back-end development, something like that. Yeah, quite a bit later.
Okay, so why don't you tell us about Ruby?
Yeah. So Ruby is an amazing language. Ruby is, it's really hard to describe, but it's a language that is not typed, not explicitly typed. So it's very like, it's hard to describe, but it's very relaxed. It's very dynamic. You can express yourself sometimes almost in pure English. Like you could literally look at the code and read it, and anyone who heard you reading it would understand what you were saying. An example like from Rails is like, if you want to get a date that is 2 weeks ago, you can literally say 2.weeks.ago, because the number 2 responds to the method weeks, which returns like a period of time, and then a period of time responds to the method ago, which returns a date that is that period of time ago. So like sometimes the code you're writing is literally like English, and you can kind of I really enjoy.
How does it compare to Python? Do you use Python much?
I had some experience with Python. I just didn't really get on with it very well. Just not really for me. But yeah, I don't have loads of experience to speak from. But
okay, because I've actually never used Ruby, and I picked up Python. I feel like anything I'm doing hacking around, it just seems so easy in Python.
Yeah,
and I get sort of a similar feeling. At first, I hated Python doesn't have the curly braces for code blocks like pretty much every other language does, and I hated that at first. But eventually, I reopened some of my code I hadn't touched for a week, and I was like, "This is so clean. This is so readable." Exactly. and I kind of came around a little bit, but
in Ruby, there's a lot of it's kind of like we put a lot of work into making the main code really clean and readable. And to do that, you almost have to like take a step back and build this abstraction that allows you to write that code. That can be really complicated. So the project I'm working on at the moment is trying to make it so that you can write like web views, web user interfaces using Ruby in a really clean and expressive way. But to make that possible, the code that I'm having to write in the library is pretty complex. Like to make that possible and to make it performant, like there's a lot of things that need to happen kind of in the background. But then you get to come back to the main code that you write every day is really, really clean because you've got this like this abstraction that does all this other stuff for you.
Right. So you mentioned Rails.
Yeah.
Should we talk about what? We should probably take a step back and what is Ruby on Rails?
Right. So Ruby on Rails is basically so Ruby is the language. So the programming language that there's a programming language and then it's interpreted, and there are actually several Ruby interpreters. But they are essentially meant to be doing the same thing when they're interpreting the code, if it's written in the same language. So you've got Ruby as the language, which is very basic, comes with very basic kind of library of things that you can do, called a standard library. And then Rails is like this web framework that's built on that allows you to build web applications pretty quickly and easily. So Rails has a lot of tools kind of built in that allow you to create a web server and route to pages that do things with data and talk to databases, and ultimately display that in a view. And that's kind of the area that I'm working on, is trying to improve on how the views are generated in the backend, basically.
Right. So the Basecamp guys did a lot of the work on Ruby on Rails. Is that right?
Yeah. So
I think are they still involved, or are they just taking them?
Yeah. I think they're still massively involved. I don't really do any work now on like the Rails core stuff. I mostly work on libraries that kind of extend Rails and work with Rails, but I don't actually work directly on Rails, or I haven't found a need to do that recently. I think, there's nothing that would stop me from doing that if I like found a bug or wanted to upstream a feature. But what I'm trying to do at the moment is like try to completely reimagine parts of Rails that I find awkward or difficult, or like, just that don't work for me. If that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. So why do you like programming so much? Big step back, because obviously you love it, right?
Yeah, I love it.
I do too, but I want to hear it from you.
It's really hard to describe it. I feel like programming for me, and especially in Ruby, and I think especially with Rails, and like the kind of Rails doctrine of programming, I think it's a lot less of a science and more of an art, more of like writing prose or writing even poetry at times. It sounds really cheesy, but I just find that it is such a beautiful and like pure expression of intentionality and like logic. And doing that and like breaking down a problem into small pieces that are really easy to read and really easy to understand, or like do something really hard. I just find that really enjoyable. It just is a lot of fun.
All right, here's a really different comment, and feel free to react or not react.
Sure.
The UK were late to the party in terms of investments in the tech industry. They've invested money now and tried to set up boot camps, but it's too little too late. So Thoughts on tech in the UK?
I don't really know. I'm not really like very much involved in. I don't know. I have no context on.
You're just working remotely for.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm not even working for anyone. I'm just developing this open source piece of technology that I think is pretty cool. And yeah,
So
like most of the people that I like collaborate with online, I guess most of them actually aren't in the UK. Now I think about it, but yeah, I don't know.
Relevant, which in some ways is sort of cool. On the other hand, you know, the pressure on wages,
Mm-hmm.
you know, gives employers more and more opportunities to offer less pay. You know, no shortage of programmers yet, so I don't think it's been a big effect. But so this open source project, this is Phlex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
with
that's
a PH.
Sorry.
With a PH.
Phlex, yeah, Phlex with a PH. And the reason that it was named Phlex is partly it's kind of related to like a few other libraries around this kind of area have that kind of thing in their name, like the stimulus reflex, not spelt with a PH. And I kind of wanted it to be kind of in that like set of libraries of like you've got like Hotwire and stimulus and stimulus reflex, and these are all approaches to like reactive responsive user interfaces where I don't know how to describe this very well, but like basically they're all based around this concept of sending HTML over the wire as opposed to sending JSON and trying to interpret it. So kind of pre-compiling what the view should be in advance and sending that as opposed to sending the raw data and having the browser interpret it. So, but yeah, I mean, I kind of named it because there are very few names available on RubyGems, and I just spent a few hours like, what is a really short name that people can remember and also isn't taken and also sounds okay when you add component at the end of it, like Phlex component.
Right. Yeah, I guess naming increasingly becomes a challenge, right?
Yeah, this is one of the issues with naming things. It's like, it's not always naming an abstraction. Just naming a library can be really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw someone arguing in a blog the other day that components should have nonsense names because it's so likely that they're gonna like change what they do in things over their evolution, that whatever name you pick is gonna end up being like not a proper description in a few years.
But then you could just change it. That's what I'd say. Like, I think it's not that hard to change a name. Like, sorry, as a question, I'll have to get back to that one in a second. But yeah, it's not that hard to change a name. I think sometimes it's really important to change a name. A really good example of this, the project I was working on at Shopify, was basically like taking data subject requests from customers and distributing them to our internal systems so that they could process them. And so we had like this record of the request, and we had this record of the service that was going to process them. And we had to have a record that joined those two records together. So we had like service request, it was called for a while, or like request service, it was called. And it was named like that
name, by the way.
For a pretty generic name, but it kind of describes the two things that it's connecting. It was named like that for a few weeks, and then we realized that it should be called assignment. Like, it's an assignment of something to do that to a service for a request, and it just when you give something like that the right name, it just becomes a lot easier to talk about and think about. Like talking about an assignment to some service, it's just really, really clear what that's doing compared with like service request, or what's that meant
service
to be?
request is It's like naming a component.
Yeah.
Component implementation. All right. So William is asking, you just decided to version bump Phlex today.
Yes.
Did you hit a milestone? How far from
Yeah.
1.0?
Kind of. I mean, there wasn't anything like major shipped today, but I hit the point where I wanted to be able to kind of push this out and say, now Phlex is in beta and it's like okay for people to start using in production as long as they are being careful and like testing things very well. And it might have some bugs and it might change, but like it's kind of just signifying that I think, you know, it's not got any glaring security holes that I know about. It's to some extent feature complete. Obviously loads of room for improvement, and there's probably going to be loads of bugs that people are going to come to me with, but it's got enough features and enough stability that I think people could start using it to build things, as long as they're happy to like come and talk to me if they find an issue.
So let me jump on one little point you made there.
Yeah.
Security.
Yeah.
How do you have any idea whether your component has security problems or not?
I don't.
Like, are there tools you're using? I mean, does anyone audit these things? Do you have outside reviewers?
I mean, Phlex is something that I've written myself, and I don't charge for it, so I don't have any budget to get an outside reviewer. The main risk, I think, with Phlex, and it is a big, like, it is being put in a place where it could have really serious security implications. And the main one, I think, for Phlex is cross-site scripting attacks. So this is where someone might post a comment, and inside that comment is some code that when someone else loads it on their computer, might run on their computer and do something like while logged in as them. So it's a pretty serious issue, or pretty serious like potential issue. And the way that it's solved in Phlex is basically every time that you put content into a view, it goes through a HTML escaper that makes sure that there can't be any code basically that can execute. And actually, because of the way that Phlex is built, it's quite easy to narrow down where the content could come from. There's basically just 3 places where user content could come from, because the rest of it is generated from the library. So it's like definitely already safe.
Okay. See.
Yeah.
Limited attack surface, as they say.
Right. Yeah, I think, and basically like every attack that I can think of, I've covered. So, for example, you can actually execute JavaScript if you are able to add some content to the page that is the href of a link. So where the link is meant to go to. If you put JavaScript : at the beginning of that link, then when someone clicks the link, it can execute some code if the content security policy isn't set up right, like to protect against that. So in Phlex, for example, we search for if you're adding an href to an a tag, we search for JavaScript at the beginning and strip it out immediately. And we also like look for like HTML event attributes, which are like an attribute you can put on a tag that says like, if you hover over this tag, execute this code, or if you press a key on your keyboard, execute this code. So we strip those out as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So some more questions. Would Speedify ever work inside a Faraday cage? Speedify needs connections to the internet. You can run Ethernet into a Faraday cage.
Yeah.
And you use Speedify, but if there's no internet connection, it doesn't do much for you.
Interesting thing about Faraday cages, I've seen in movies people put phones in microwaves, not to turn them on, but like because of the Faraday cage to like stop the phones from having connections. But I've tested this with my microwave and it doesn't work. Like my phone still receives connections in the microwave with the door shut. Is that meant to happen? Is my microwave broken?
I don't know. I haven't actually tried it. I've always been terrified of. I've held my phone next to the microwave and seen the signal strength dip.
Faulty microwave.
So
Oh no.
like there's,
no, I think you're not meant to microwave your phone.
I do recall, and I'm remembering high school physics here. A conversation with. I mean, the mesh on the microwaves is tuned to the frequency of the microwave.
Yeah, and not to the frequency of the phone.
Light gets in and out and stuff, but that's around 2.5 gigahertz. I think it's not that far from the phones. I kind of would expect it to mess with the phones.
Well, my phone seems to work in my microwave, so maybe my microwave is broken.
You're a brave man. I wouldn't. Yeah. I'm just not going to.
In case you close the door and it turns on automatically.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the Keggy asks, when you left Shopify in July, do you see it as an opportunity to start doing your own projects?
I mean, yeah. I don't currently have a job. I'm keeping an eye out, trying to figure out what I'm doing next. There's a few opportunities that I'm exploring, but I'm not really sure what that is. And in the meantime, I think that the best thing that I can do, not only for myself in terms of like having more exposure to companies that might be hiring, but also just because I want to like share the software with people, is like to work on these projects. And so Phlex, I actually started Phlex before I left Shopify, and was in the process of pitching it as a Shopify project, because I was on a team that works on things like this, like open source libraries. And so like I just kind of had an opportunity to do it.
Nice.
What was the original question? I can't remember. Yeah, it was an opportunity.
You saw it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Positive spin on things, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get feedback for Phlex? How do people reach you if they're
so there's
delighted or hated?
a lot of people give me feedback on Twitter, but there's also a Discord channel in the Stimulus Reflex Discord. They've set up a channel for us. Also, people can post either an issue or a pull request, or a discussion on the GitHub page as well.
All right.
Yeah.
God is Invisible asks, can you outline the steps in creating a process for sending assignments for data subject requests to systems? I assume this is someone you know.
Who is this? I'm trying to find...
God is not invisible.
God is not invisible. The steps in creating a process.
I think we can move on. All right, faulty microwave.
That's possibly.
All right. So a lot of people reacting to you putting your phone in a microwave.
I should just do this live and see if it works.
Yeah. That's a terrible idea. You should do it. Oh man. All right. So, what kind of setup are you using? Like what kind of computer are you on?
Yeah.
What
okay.
Kind of
so,
do you use?
oh, that's a good question. I think this is the Rode NT Mini. I think. I use a MacBook Pro. I have an M1 MacBook Pro at the moment. I'm currently using, because it's dark here and my webcam's not very good, and the MacBook webcam is awful. I'm using my my Sony, I think it's A7.
You're not using your phone? You're
No.
not using continuity camera?
No, I have the Sony A7R4 with a it's the Prime 20. No, what is it? I can't remember what millimeter lens it is. 28 millimeter lens. It's my favorite lens actually. But yeah, other parts of my setup, I just have a basic like laptop. One thing that I do really like to do about with my setup, and actually I tweeted about this the other day because it seems that not many people do it. People ask, like, is it better to have a desktop or a laptop? And my take on that is you can definitely have the best of both worlds, at least with a Mac, if you have an external monitor that has USB ports in it and you just plug it into your laptop and close your laptop, and then use an external keyboard and mouse. And then if you want to go somewhere, you just unplug it and take it with you. So I do that.
I should post a picture of my desk because I have 2 external monitors, one portrait and one landscape.
Oh, that's cool. Yep.
And I keep the laptop open, so I've got this like all of 3 monitors, and so I'll keep the text document on the portrait one, and so I'll move things all around.
I never got on very well with multiple monitor setup. I find that it's quicker for me to command tab between apps than it is for me to move my eyes and refocus on a different monitor. So I usually only use one monitor.
Yeah, so certainly I've heard people suggest that I should just get a great 4K monitor.
Yeah.
Although I am I'm careful to curve the monitors so they're all at the same distance.
Right.
Because I do think about refocusing time.
Dark mode or regular? That's a good question. I do not use my macOS in dark mode, and I use light mode for almost everything, with one exception. Usually, my text editor is in dark mode, but that's it. It's the only thing.
I don't know why.
And sometimes I set that to light
very
mode as
normal
well.
with developers, but just your code editors in dark mode.
Yeah, I like everything else to, even my terminal. I don't want my terminal in dark mode. I think that helps me kind of like when I'm switching between my text editor and my terminal, it's like really visually different. My favorite text editor is Nova by Panic.
I have not tried that.
And my
So
favorite.
what's so great about it?
It's just like it's just the next best thing after Atom. Was discontinued. So Atom is really, in fact, I think Nova actually is better than Atom now. I was very, very sad when GitHub discontinued Atom, and VS Code is nothing on Atom. But Nova, I think, is a really, really interesting take. I like that they have, they've built it for Mac using Mac technologies, and they haven't tried to make like this cross-platform Electron app that's really slow. So Nova.
I liked Atom. I mean, last year I switched from Emacs to Atom. That's how nice it was. And then they immediately discontinued it.
I know, it's so annoying. It was so good. So I use Nova as my text editor, and I use a font called JetBrains Mono as the font in that text editor. I really like it because it's got like really good readability for a monospace font, and also, or I should say typeface really. Also, it comes with really nice ligatures for things that you do in code, like a literal proc or a literal lambda would be like dash and then less than or greater than. Which one am I talking about? Dash and then greater than. And so it has like a ligature that joins those into a single character that's been specifically drawn to represent that.
Nice.
Or like exclamation mark
so
equals,
cool.
not equals.
Innovation in the fonts and stuff is so cool, right? That the fonts specifically for computer programmers or for people with poor vision, or the Google stuff about trying to make, what is it called, the font that works in every language.
Right.
Seems like an endless project, but
and as a terminal, I use a app called Warp, which is warp.dev, which is just a really nice take on a terminal. I only switched to that very recently from the basic built-in one.
All right.
How
And
long
William
is the
asks-
longest code Alex or Joel have written? That's a very interesting question. Like the longest line of code? I think I probably wrote my longest line of code quite recently because there's some stuff that I'm doing in Phlex that for performance reasons can't easily be broken up onto multiple lines, which seems really strange, but like
it does seem strange.
And you could technically break it up onto multiple lines, but it's kind of easier for me. Like it looks better to me to not do that and to just have it wrap. And it's basically lots of string appends. And Ruby optimizes the string appends if they are chained together. So it's like append A, B, and C, as opposed to append A, and then on the next line append B.
Okay, so it's smart about.
But like, you don't really want to write long lines of code. I don't know if that's what the question was really about.
So William's comment about how he's a dev with 4 screens and one of them's 4K. For some reason, my thought is VR stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, are we going to code in VR, right? I mean, theoretically, you could have an infinite screen. You move your head, right? You
It would be like dreaming in code, wouldn't it?
Which I sometimes do. I often wake up with bug fixes, right?
Yeah, I think probably like 75% of my dreams are in code.
So,
I couldn't code because I'd lose my mind if I wrote like 500 lines and one thing was wrong and I had to keep go through it. So, what's really nice about most like programming languages is when you try to run them and there's an error, they will tell you where the error was, usually. Or if they don't, then like the test that you've written for it should, to some extent, help you narrow it down.
What's that? Sorry, I know what a test is. Well, Dennis asks, is Ruby on Rails dead?
No.
Now, when you Google Ruby on Rails, Google brings up like, common questions. And for me, the first common question is Ruby on Rails dead? You click on it, it's like, no. So
I mean,
why
I don't
is
think
this
it's
a thing?
dead.
Why are people talking about it?
I mean, I think it's dead if people decide to, like, if I could say, if I was starting a new project today, it wouldn't be in Rails. But I wouldn't be able to say that. Like, if I want to build an app and get it to a point where it can, like, actually do something very quickly, Ruby on Rails is still the thing that I would use. I think that it's an incredibly powerful set of tools.
I mean, certainly when Ruby on Rails came out, it was it's revolutionary, right? How fast you could build an interactive website with it. And I think a lot of other tools have sort of copied some of the great ideas there. So I think somebody wandering to it now might not see what was so special.
Right.
But Marby asks, how and when is a language declared dead?
I guess when people stop working on it. But I mean, loads of people are still working on Ruby. Like, there's still loads of activity. There's new versions released every few months. There are people working on multiple implementations of Ruby interpreters. Like, we've got JRuby, we've got Truffle Ruby, we've got MRI, and a bunch of other, like, smaller scale Ruby interpreters. So the Ruby language isn't going anywhere, I don't think.
So let me tell a little story. 1995, I interviewed for a job. Giving away my age here. And it goes great. It's a consulting company in Manhattan.
Yeah.
They take me from person's cube to person's cube, and I'm acing everything. And they're like, the CTO wants to talk to you. Take me in the elevator to the top floor of this, they take me to this conference room with this lady looking down on Manhattan, right? There's skyscrapers underneath us, and it's obviously supposed to impress me. And she says, I only have one question for you. If we gave you a job offer for far more money, than anyone else offered you.
Yeah.
But we told you your first project was programming in COBOL. What would you say? And I said, well, I understand the new guy is the low man on the totem pole. So sure, I'd do a project or two in COBOL before you move me on to something more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, that's fantastic. Everyone else just says they wouldn't take the job. So they made me a job offer for far more money than anyone else offered me. And I didn't take it because I knew that once they put me on this COBOL project, they'd never hire a replacement. And that would be my career.
Yeah.
So I couldn't take it. So that's my dead language story.
Isn't there there's only a handful of people in the world that know COBOL now?
I don't know.
I seem to remember during the pandemic reading something about this related to ventilator machines, and they needed COBOL experts to do something related to the ventilators that they were trying to build.
I think there's still a surprising amount of COBOL still running.
Yes.
In the most important things, right? It's not in anything goofy and little. It's the ventilators and the money transfer algorithms between banks, the most important things in the world. Some of those are still in COBOL, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I never learned COBOL. I don't think I've even seen. I don't think I'd recognize it if I was to look at it.
All right. Kane asks, do you think Fastlane will eventually be ported from Ruby to something different?
I don't know what Fastlane is. Oh, Fastlane.
Fastlane, sorry.
Fastlane, I'm looking it up.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either. I was going to ask you, and could you explain what Fastlane is?
Yeah.
That was my brilliant.
I'm struggling to even find it. Fastlane.
No, Mike, he doesn't think it ever will be ported.
I've no idea what it is. It looks like maybe something to do with iOS development, but I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, that Fastlane. Yeah, there's something for iOS.
There was a question about Phlex performance. How does it compare to similar options? So there are a few different areas that you can measure. Phlex compares very well to other options when it comes to the performance of rendering a partial, or rendering the cost of rendering a new component. So if a component might be basically anything you could point to on a web page and draw a circle around, like a button, a text field, a header, these are all basically loads and loads of components and components inside components. And Phlex is very fast at loading a new partial, and it's at the moment slightly slower at actually rendering that partial when it's got lots of markup in it and lots of attributes. And that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment, is building a compiler that will basically look at your Ruby code and compile it to faster Ruby code, kind of in the background without you noticing, so that you can write the really nice, clean Ruby code that's really fun and easy to write, but then it produces the kind of high performance Ruby code. And what this can do is it can basically fold what might be 100 method calls into just one string append instead in some circumstances. So it could be, it's hard to describe how much of an impact this compiler will have, because it depends how big your component is. To some extent, it doesn't matter how big it is. It will be the same. It will have the same performance if it can be compiled to the same number of string appends or close to the same performance. But it's fast. It will probably be the fastest very soon.
All right. So Kane follows up and says it's an automated build tool. Yeah. So in fact, we use it. I realize now, right? It's the thing that we takes our Android and iOS builds and sign them and submit
Oh,
them.
okay, right.
I actually submit them to Google and to Apple, marked as betas or as releases.
Right.
Yeah, so it's actually an important part of our continuous integration.
I have no context on that to answer that question.
Yeah. So, all right, no idea.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what is next for you? Do you know? Do you have plans for?
Immediately next is working on this compiler and trying to finish that. I think that is like the most pressing thing that I want to do at the moment. After that, I think I'd like to kind of just revisit some of my other projects and like get them more up to date. And also like just kind of tell more people about them. I've written a few other open source libraries that I haven't really marketed at all, and barely anyone knows about them. And I think that they're actually pretty good, and hopefully people can find a use for them. So I'm probably going to spend some time on that, and then I'm not sure. Trying to figure out what to do next in terms of like where I'm working, what I want to do for the next few years.
All right. This is close to what my next question was going to be. Dennis is asking, which books can you recommend to someone learning programming?
Yeah, okay. So I was asked this question very recently, and I wrote actually a list of just a handful of books that I would start with. So if you're a complete beginner, this is basically where I would start. And I would not just do the books, but like try to find some good video courses and things as well. There's this book called Wise Poignant Guide to Ruby, which is just a really excellent introduction. Then I also recommend The Practical Object-Oriented Design by Sandy Metz. Then there's a book that I would recommend getting, which is called The Well-Grounded Rubyist, and it's basically like a really big language reference. It's the kind of thing that you should not expect yourself to remember everything from. Like, read it from cover to cover, but you don't need to remember everything. Like, you'll remember that there was something about that thing in the book, and you can look it up later, but it's a good reference. Other great books are Refactoring by Martin Fowler, which is basically like
classic for any language, right?
Yeah, just
not
amazing.
A Ruby book. That's just
it's not a Ruby book, but it's so worth reading. Like, it basically just shows you some code that is like it works, and it's not great, and it has like this particular way that it could be improved. And there's like hundreds of ways that you can improve code that's structured in one way and make it like better, make it more easy to read and easy to understand. The Pragmatic Programmer is also a kind of classic, quite old book, kind of more on like the craft of programming as opposed to like any specific language. So it's like more like principles like leaving no broken windows, which is this concept of like, I'm trying to remember the example, but basically, like, I think the example he gives is this car that's been like sat somewhere for months and it hasn't been touched, but then the minute that one window is broken, it gets completely like smashed by, like within a few days, every single window is broken because, yeah, whatever. But how that applies to programming is like, you kind of don't want to leave any smelly code around for too long. Like, don't leave something really badly tested or like anything really bad, because it kind of sets the tone for other stuff. I don't know, it's generally just a really good book on like some kind of more abstract principles of programming. And another one, the last one on my list was Grokking Algorithms, which sounds really kind of scary, but it's basically like it's like cartoon drawings and like sketches to try to explain how some simple algorithms work, and it's just amazing like way to get into that and try to understand how these things work.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how do you stay on top of things? Sounds like you certainly read at least some books, but
Yeah.
like what sites, what videos, what books are you reading these days? How do you?
So I don't know. I don't necessarily stay on top of things. Like I'm not like entirely up to date. I try to kind of keep a half an eye on like what's happening through a bunch of newsletters, particularly in the Ruby community and the Rails community. I'm also on Twitter quite a bit, which kind of helps with like keeping up to date with various happenings. But I think it's almost more important to like take more time to just read the higher quality stuff that people actually put a lot of time into. Like if someone puts together a course or publishes a book that's related to Ruby or Rails, then I want to kind of prioritize that more than like the tweets and the newsletters, if that makes sense.
That's probably a good idea. I probably spend
too
much
like,
time on like Hacker News, right?
Yeah, I never touch Hacker News. But if I've only got like maybe an hour a day for this kind of thing, I would rather that be a book that someone has really well edited and it's like the best of their knowledge that you can read in a couple hours, than like a couple of hours spent like reading Hacker News is just not very productive.
You know, and I'm going to say Hacker News is well above average as far as news aggregators and stopping people from devolving into political discussions in the forums. They just don't allow it, right? So that's good. All right. So let's see. So I think we are just about at 5:00 Eastern. So you're actually, where are you right now?
Yeah, so I live in really small village in Oxfordshire, which is the kind of county area around Oxford City in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working from home from here for a while, and now I don't have a job, so I'm completely remote.
Dodge is asking, would you present, I think, Phlex at a conference?
Yeah. I've never given a conference talk before, actually. But I definitely would. Yeah, I think some of the stuff that we're doing in Phlex is really interesting. Like especially the recent stuff with the compiler. Like it's pretty rare for a library to like actually pass and inspect the code that you've written and then compile it to some other code in the same language and then like put that, like replace the code that you've written with that faster code and then run that. Like it's a pretty weird technique. So that might be interesting to talk about, like how we've done that.
Yeah, that would be a good talk.
But yeah, I've never done a conference talk before. But that sounds fun.
All right, so if you have a conference, Dodge, invite him.
Yeah.
All right. William says, speed test some bonded connections in your microwave.
Yeah, we should do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it straight after the show. And
good luck.
Yeah.
This could be the highlight. So could you just tap the start button to turn on the light?
Yeah.
That would be my helpful advice during the...
Yes, the video. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right. Yes. Definitely weird how many broken Windows theories there are in many.
Yeah.
So, there are people on Twitter, by the way, who say this whole broken window theory is not true, was never true. And
Interesting.
It's entirely a thing said to explain why we should put militarized cops into minority neighborhoods. and that it's just a story that people are like, oh, that does make sense. That does make
Well-
sense. We should do them a favor and put cops all over their neighborhoods so no windows get broken. I don't know.
That may well
you
be.
can find all sorts of opinions on Twitter,
Huh.
and I do not have it. Right, I don't have the
Well,
time
I
to
would
figure out
say
who's
that,
right or wrong.
That may well be, and so we can throw out that analogy, but we can still say that
We can still keep the code because it never actually had anything to do with it.
Yeah, it's not related. You should write good code because, like, that is. I don't know. There's something. I feel like there's something really important about doing things really well and like just doing a good job of things. Sounds weird, but like in the craft that you adopt, like doing it to a higher standard, I think gives the most gives the highest levels of satisfaction. And I think that that's really important.
I hear you. I spend an hour today renaming variables.
Yeah.
Right? There were
Yep.
host names being stored in variables whose names ended in URL, but there was
Yep.
no like HTTPS at the front, and so I had to rewrite, run around renaming variables.
Yeah. I spent
Change
all
nothing
day-
at runtime, by the way.
I spent all day yesterday trying to understand why the compiled code, basically, we take the code, we compile it into faster code, and then format that and output it. The compiled code basically had this white space error where things were being put on new lines that shouldn't be on new lines. And no one's ever going to see this code. No one's ever going to read this code that's generated. But I spent the entire day yesterday making sure that the code was formatted in the way that would make me be proud of it if someone was to see it.
Yeah.
That was probably a day completely wasted, but I felt good about it.
You leave my stinky code alone. I'm gonna start putting "do not refactor" on all my methods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There
You
are
actually-
occasional.
Oh, I was just going to say, in the notes, you had a really good question.
I did?
That I want to bring up. And that was basically like, how do you decide on
So
trade-offs?
you have you have two functions. That one.
Yeah.
All right. So here's my question, Joel.
Yeah.
So let's say you have two questions. You have two different
Two
functions to solve a problem. The functions are not in a critical path, so not being run millions of times per second or anything.
Right.
But one function uses half the lines of code as the other. It's easy to maintain. The other function is twice as fast. You can't choose, but it's kind of cryptic, right? You can't choose both. Which one would you use?
I'd go with the one that's more readable. If it's not in a critical path, go with the one that's more readable and more maintainable. But even like more so, like I would ask, can I write this in a way that is really readable, but then is just as fast because I've abstracted away the nasty code into something else? If that makes sense, like
it does make sense. Yeah.
Hide the bad code, and try to make libraries that are full of like not bad code, but code that's really ugly and really complex and really difficult to work with. If you can hide that in a library and then share the output of that across multiple apps that have really nice, clean, beautiful code, I think that's a really good thing to do. Like that's exactly what I'm doing with Phlex, is trying to take some of the complexities and like put them in Phlex. Like the Phlex code base is really quite ugly and confusing. There are a lot of things where we've decided, like, although this could be a lot clearer if it was written like this, we're actually going to write it like this because it's a lot faster. Or even it's like a tiny bit faster, but it's going to be called thousands of times per render on thousands of people's applications, thousands of times a day. But like we don't compromise on the developer experience. The API that this library will have is really simple. Like to the extent that we literally are rewriting the Ruby code, like parsing it, compiling it into faster Ruby code, and then giving that back to your application without you even seeing it.
So the developer is your customer, even though you're just giving this away for free. So you're trying to give him a great experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or her. All right. Neato. All right. So I think we're just about done here. So we have a lot more events coming up here. So, like, follow, subscribe. On the 20th, we're going to have Rob from Uscreen. On the 22nd, we're going to have Glassman Cometh, the glass blower. He live streams blowing glass.
Oh, wow.
On the 29th, we're going to live or IRLing to Fright Map's Halloween Market. And then on October 4th, we're going to have Black Magic Design, right? These are the people who not only make like the ATEM Mini, video switching devices that a lot of live streamers use. They make the giant consoles that you see in the TV studios that the producers are using, right? They make, all the high-end video gear. Neat company. And we'll have them in a couple weeks. So those are reasons to come back. So where can people find, naming things?
Naming Things is just at namingthings.org.
Makes it easy.
So yeah, that makes it pretty easy.
And Phlex is at flex.fun. Is that right?
Flex.fun, Flex with the PH. And you can find me on Twitter, mostly at my username is Joel Drapper, which is like Draper but with 2 P's.
Great. All right. Awesome. So people are posting the URLs here in the comments so you guys can follow up. So thank you, Joel. This was awesome. Thank you to everybody who asked questions, everybody who watched. Really appreciate you turning out here. So thank you very much and good night.
All right.
Bye-bye.